criticizing that access. Plus the latest on the winter storm that is moving through Minnesota. It was on this date in 1861 when President-elect Abraham Lincoln arrived secretly in Washington to take office following word of a possible assassination plot in Baltimore. Today's birthdays include former St. Paul Pioneer Press reporter, now best-selling author John Camp. You know him as John Sanford. John is 79. It's 6:01, and the news is next. Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The National Weather Service says 2 major winter storms are pelting much of the country. There's a weather system in Southern California that will turn into blizzard conditions in mountainous areas by tomorrow. That could affect travel just outside Los Angeles. A second storm is bringing more blizzard conditions to northern states. That includes South Dakota. Dustin Hanson is with the Public Works Department in the city of Sioux Falls, and he says crews have been plowing streets.
So we'll run 24-hour shifts until we get this event cleaned up. Likely be working through Sunday and potentially in the next week on these 12-hour shifts.
Farther east, ice and snow have cut power to more than 750,000 customers in Michigan and Illinois alone. That's according to the tracking site poweroutage.us. Minutes from the Federal Reserve's most recent policy meeting offer new insights into how the central bank is approaching inflation. NPR's Scott Horsley tells us the Fed has raised interest rates aggressively as it tries to bring prices under control.
The Fed has raised interest rates 8 times since March, including its most recent rate hike of a 0.25 percentage point earlier this month. The vote for that rate increase was unanimous, but newly released minutes show a few members of the rate-setting committee were willing to go even faster and boost borrowing costs by a 0.5 percentage point instead. The Fed has telegraphed that additional rate hikes are likely. Investors now expect that interest rates will stay higher for longer than they were anticipating just a few weeks ago. Some Fed officials think that as consumers become more price-sensitive, businesses will be forced to cut their profit margins. That could also help to bring down inflation. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
The Canadian Defense Department says it is aware of Chinese efforts to conduct surveillance operations in Canadian airspace and waters. As Dan Karpenchuk tells us, an earlier report said Chinese surveillance buoys have been detected in Arctic waters.
Defense Department spokesman Daniel Leboutillier would not provide further information, saying it's to ensure the integrity of military operations. Toronto's Globe and Mail had reported that the Canadian military had detected Chinese monitoring buoys in the Arctic. An expert on Arctic marine security says buoys were likely dropped by Chinese icebreakers and could be used to chart the seafloor in Canadian territory and perhaps even track American submarines. Earlier, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly referred to China as an increasingly disruptive power, adding that Ottawa will work with NORAD to protect North American airspace and take a strong position on Canada's Arctic sovereignty. For NPR News, I'm Dan Karpenchuk in Toronto.
The United Nations General Assembly is expected to vote today on a resolution. It calls for peace in Ukraine. The first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine is tomorrow. The draft resolution at the UN calls for an immediate ceasefire. It also demands that Russia leave Ukraine. You're listening to NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy. Clients are matched with one of 25,000 therapists and can communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public.
For NPR News in the Twin Cities, I'm Phil Picardi. Another band of heavy snow is moving across much of southern and eastern Minnesota this morning, adding to the snow already on the landscape. National Weather Service meteorologist Paige Martin says strong northeast winds are blowing and drifting the snow, and it's difficult to tell exactly how much has fallen.
So far, looking at our storm report map, we definitely have amounts over a foot. Definitely didn't hit the high mark. So rain and such down in Illinois kind of robbing some moisture from us.
Martin says total snowfall amounts likely will be short of the 16 inches or more at the top end of the forecast ahead of the storm. As of early this morning, 7 inches of new snow measured in Mankato, 11 inches in Zimmerman, and nearly 7 inches at the Twin Cities airports. MnDOT says Interstate 90 is closed between the South Dakota border and Worthington. Other highway closures include U.S. Highway 75 south of Ivanhoe and Highway 14 west of Sanborn. No travel advisories are in place across a wider swath of the state, including Montevideo, Wilmer, Hutchinson, Redwood Falls, and Fairmont. To the west, I-90 also is closed across the eastern half of South Dakota. I-94 is closed between Fargo and Bismarck in North Dakota, and I-29 is closed between Fargo and Sioux Falls. Closed and snow-covered roads are posing significant challenges for emergency responders. In southern Minnesota, Kate Arms is the ambulance operations manager at Mayo Clinic. She says EMS workers who transport patients are taking it slow.
We might, instead of going 60 miles an hour to a call, we might only go 30 to ensure that we can get a crew there in a timely manner and that we can get there safely.
Arms says some patients can opt to be treated in place or use telehealth services while EMS staff are present. The cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul are offering free and discounted parking to get vehicles off of streets during the snow emergencies. Matt Sepik reports.
Parking is free through Saturday morning at 8 ramps in downtown St. Paul. On the west side, free spaces are available at the Wellstone Center through tomorrow morning. The city of Minneapolis has also set aside some of its lots and ramps for snow emergency parking, including 2 uptown ramps. The free lots near Lake and Lindale and the Walker Arts Center are already full. The 3,600 spaces at Ramp A near Target Field are only $1 a day through Tuesday, but if you enter between 4 and 8 p.m. tomorrow, Saturday, or Sunday, you'll get stuck paying the $14 event fee. Ramps B and C near the ballpark are still charging their regular rates. I'm Matt Sepik, Minneapolis.
And this is NPR News.
Support comes from the Minneapolis Home and Garden Show, where you can get inspired, ask questions, and see the work of industry professionals. March 1st through the 5th at the Minneapolis Convention Center. Tickets at homeandgardenshow.com. Support comes from Care Counseling with same-week availability, experienced therapists, and acceptance of all insurances. Care Counseling can help with your family's mental health needs. You can get matched with a therapist and schedule online at carecounseling.com.
Rene Martinez in Culver City, California.
And I'm Steve Inskeep in Washington, D.C. Good morning. In their own way, House Republicans are finally investigating the attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021. You will recall that many people have investigated the attempt to overturn a Democratic election. Prosecutors have obtained many convictions. Grand juries are still out. A House committee investigated for nearly 2 years, and that committee included 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans, although most Republicans pulled out of the committee. Now Republicans control the House of Representatives, which means they control the evidence, and Speaker Kevin McCarthy has reportedly given a lot of it to an investigator. Fox News host Tucker Carlson. Carlson says so anyway. He's done entire programs and documentaries promoting conspiracy theories and alternative histories of the attack. We called the Democratic chairman of the January 6th House investigation, Benny Thompson of Mississippi, who now serves as the ranking member, the top Democrat, on the Homeland Security Committee. Congressman Thompson, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Democrats are saying it's dangerous to get this video out there. Why would it be?
Well, it's dangerous because some of the video we chose not to share in concert with the Capitol Police because it would compromise the security of the Capitol. And at no point did we want to make the Capitol more vulnerable by sharing that kind of information with the public. And so we had a rigorous process. And we went through it and decided on a number of occasions that we would not share certain videos. But now to make the entire 44,000 hours of video available to just one network is not in the good interests of this country.
Can you give me some idea of what kind of compromising information you were talking about? Granting you may not want to be too specific, but do you mean this video would reveal something about a way that other people could attack the Capitol?
You know, there are a number of cameras positioned all through the Capitol. That video would identify those positions. When members were escorted out of the Capitol during the height of the insurrection, that path is a secured path, not known to the public. it's available on the video. So if there was someone who wanted to do harm to people, then access to this video clearly puts those individuals who work in that building, who visit the building, at risk.
It's pretty clear what someone like Tucker Carlson can do with video like this. He can at least make an argument. He can advance a narrative that your committee, edited it selectively. That is surely one of the narratives that can come out of this. Carlson can go into the fuller video and say, look what they didn't show, look what they didn't show.
Well, let me say that there were things that we did not show, but it was because the Capitol Police said, no, this is a security risk, don't do it. And we followed it. And let me tell you how that process worked. We had a secure terminal. We had certain individuals who had access to it. They had a sole password for themselves to do it. And at no point did we access any video without the chief of the Capitol Police's approval.
Well, let's get you a chance to answer a bottom line question here then. We did see your many hearings on this. They were highly produced. There was a lot of information in them, but it was your committee's point of view. Are you prepared to say that you stand entirely behind that and that you left out nothing truly important that the public needed to understand the attack on the Capitol that day?
There's absolutely nothing that we produced that we can't prove. The only items that we did not share with the public based on the material we shared was because of the Capitol Police's insistence that we not do it because it would make the Capitol more vulnerable.
Do you have any way, Congressman, to prevent the release of video that you think would be hazardous? Is there a legal mechanism or any other?
Well, there's no legal mechanism, but look, Speaker McCarthy ought to understand the gravity of what this decision means to the public. I understand he had to make certain commitments to become Speaker, but those commitments, under no circumstance, should jeopardize the safety and security of the United States Capitol. So he should have consulted Democrats. He should have consulted Leader Jeffries and said, look, but as you understand, the chief of the Capitol Police didn't know that this material had been released until it was in print. So this was an individual decision made by the Speaker. Can you imagine the chief of the Capitol Police reading about it in the paper?
Just in about 10 seconds, are you convinced of what you just suggested, that McCarthy is releasing video to Tucker Carlson because he did that to get right-wing votes to be Speaker?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Benny Thompson is the ranking member, the top Democrat on the House Homeland Security Committee, and was the chairman of the House Committee investigating the January 6th attack.
They used to be called Kremlinologists. That's Americans and others who closely study the communist leadership of the former Soviet Union. Now, there's a new generation of experts who could be called Putinologists. They're trying to understand Russia by analyzing its leader, Vladimir Putin, and the war he's waging in Ukraine. NPR national security correspondent Greg Myrie has our story.
As Russian President Vladimir Putin massed his military on Ukraine's border in late 2021, many analysts doubted Putin would actually invade. But not Dmitry Alperovitch.
He was seeing Ukraine slip away from his orbit, and when he saw that he could no longer control it, it was pretty clear to me that he was going to try to move in and attempt a regime change.
Alperovitch was born in Moscow and came to the U.S. at age 13 in 1994. He's never returned to Russia, though that country and Putin have shaped his life. He was a founder of the cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike, which often investigated Russian computer hacks, like that 2016 breach of the Democratic National Committee. Here's how he describes the Russian leader.
I've always viewed him as a gambler. Most of the time he had got lucky. This is the one gamble that's probably his biggest, that has not worked out well so far.
Alperovitch now heads Silverado Policy Accelerator, a think tank with a strong focus on Russia and Putin.
I think Putinologist is a good tagline. He sees himself, I believe, as a new czar. In fact, he has more power today as a Russian leader than really anyone since Stalin.
Kremlinologists tried to interpret the Soviet Union from fragmentary information coming out of the highly secretive communist leadership. Putin is a much more public figure than Soviet leaders, but he's also highly unpredictable, creating a demand for Putinologists like Julia Yoffe, who accepts the label with some reluctance.
It's something I've fought for a long time, but at the same time, people in the West have a really hard time understanding him, and somebody needs to translate him for the West, so okay, I'll do it.
She left Moscow for the U.S. with her family at age 7 in 1990. In college at Princeton, she planned to be a doctor.
But I couldn't resist Soviet history and switched tracks. I kept trying to do something else and kept getting sucked in professionally. So I've basically been doing this professionally in one form or another my whole professional life.
That included a 3-year stint in Moscow a decade ago. Her editor suggested she write a column called Kremlinology 2012.
It was supposed to be a kind of tongue-in-cheek thing because it was like, who does Kremlinology anymore? But of course, the system was becoming more and more and more Soviet, and there were fewer and fewer ways to get into it to understand it. So it's back.
Yoffe, who now writes for Puck News, traveled often to Russia until a few years ago. She writes about the way Putin shaped Russia and prepared it for his military adventures.
He created this cult around World War II that glorifies war, that sanctifies war, and then once a war starts, it's pretty easy to convince Russians that this is a war just like that, and that they need to go and do it.
Michael Kaufman says emphatically he should not be called a Putinologist. He's an expert on Russia's military, a specialty that nearly vanished when the Soviet Union collapsed.
The field of Russian military studies had almost died or was on life support. So I found myself, in many respects, trying to work to help revive the field.